are welcoming the new year in style. Happy 2026, the first episode for the year. That's NESHA Talks with your one and only Dr. Nelson Makemba. Dr. Makemba, happy 2026.
Yeah.
How was the holiday?
And happy
Thank
2026.
you. We are back.
We are back refreshed and we are excited to be here. Looking forward to a great year.
Indeed, indeed. Yeah. Did you get the rest, Doc? Because last year you told us to avoid cardiovascular diseases, we need to rest.
Yeah, no, definitely. I got the much needed rest and I'm refreshed and I'm fired up, looking forward to serving them as usual.
Great, great stuff. Well, it's January and February. We're kicking off this brand new year with a very important topic about chronic disease management. For those that don't know what chronic means, let's place it in perspective, Doc.
Yeah, to put things into perspective, when you're talking about a chronic disease, it's probably an individual that have been handed down a diagnosis of an illness that probably they might have to live with for the rest of their lives. Things like diabetes, for instance, once you're diagnosed with that, you probably have to live with it for the rest of your life. High blood pressure and so forth. So chronic diseases are diseases that once given the diagnosis, it stays with you. It's not one of those where you pop a pill and tomorrow is gone. You probably have to now look at a marathon, going a long way with this disease, managing the disease, readjusting your lifestyle to make sure that everything line up so that, it doesn't get the best of you.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned a couple of diseases, diabetes. I'm now thinking about, those really life-threatening cancer, etc. How does one prepare for a diagnosis as such, Doc?
Indeed, it's a very difficult one. Just to highlight something very important here. Even with us healthcare providers, giving your patient a chronic diagnosis, especially cancer, for instance, it's not an easy thing to do. And obviously, you always need to prepare the patient, create a safe environment, and also make sure that this is not a rushed consultation. And when you have a diagnosis like that, you probably want to schedule them. Either they come in the earliest or they are the first patient, is still quiet in the clinic, or you give them the last schedule for the day. You know that after you've spoken to them, you don't have to talk to anybody else. You have enough time. Yeah. Because a lot of emotions come up. Patients, sometimes they start crying in front of you and they got all the kinds of questions, am I going to die now? And especially if they still have children, what will happen to my children? Yeah. So those are the consideration that goes into breaking bad news in relation to chronic diseases, especially when they are life-threatening. Yeah. Perhaps a high blood pressure, in as much as it also have its own complication, it's a little bit easier to tell somebody, look, you have a high blood pressure. But then you need to also emphasize the importance of taking the medication. But when, they are life-threatening like cancer and so forth, it takes a toll on the patient. So one need to always be cautious. And the language that you also choose to use in breaking this kind of news to the patient should be that one of caring. You need to be empathetic and also understanding. And sometimes the patient might end up asking more questions than you have budgeted for. So the idea is for you not to try and rush the patient or say, no, don't worry, we can talk about it another day. So you have to give them all the time that they need to get, and they need to clarify them on a lot of things so that when they leave with an understanding. And also, when it comes to chronic diagnosis, especially when they are life-threatening also, sometimes we are finding ourselves in a place where you want to offer hope, but given the understanding, you also know that the person might not have all that much long to live. Yeah. You need to find a way to be honest enough, but in a manner that, you are also caring to the patient, that they understand that, you are also, concerned that now this is their situation, but you are willing to be there for them, up until, the last minute.
Very difficult indeed, Doc. I mean, we've been in that position with family members, loved ones as well. And on this show, we always try to give advice for those around those that have been diagnosed. So let's start with the primary care health givers. Let's even speak about family members as well. A husband, a wife, a daughter, a son. What is that management plan that you have to put in place once somebody is diagnosed with a chronic illness?
It's a team-based approach. It involves clinicians, be the doctor. It involves the nurses that is caring for the patient, particularly also if they are going to be institutionalized, meaning admitted in a hospital facility. It involves also, the pharmacist. It involves psychologists, particularly also if perhaps the diagnosis has now also impacted their psychological space and maybe they are somewhat depressed. And also the family now that have to care for the individual with a chronic illness. They need to understand their disease as well. And also what you tend to see most of the time, particularly with parents, I guess it's out of love for their children. For instance, when it comes to things like cancer, sometimes they might say like, Doc, I don't want my children to know about it now. I don't want them to be scared and think that daddy is now probably gonna, leave us anytime soon.
Is that a wise thing to keep it away from the family, Doc?
Not necessarily. That's why we are always cautious to say, look, we might not give the news abruptly, but we also don't want to keep it from them far too long. Because then also at the end, if you do that, your children might feel like, you have deceived them, you betrayed them, And if only you come out when it's almost, 5 minutes to midnight, the curtain has to be pulled. They feel they were not prepared. Now they just find out, daddy has cancer and it looks like, we are about to lose him. So those are the kind of challenges. So we need to navigate this space, with the sensitivity that it requires. We also need to encourage the patients to say, look, you need to open up to the loved one, maybe gradually, but don't also keep the news from them for the longest of time for them to only, come, because eventually they will have to find out anyway. So because disease progression is such that it might get worse over time. And then, you now have to come clean and say the reason why, I've been not feeling well, my hair is falling off, I'm doing chemotherapy. So you don't want it to get to that level before you break the news. So somewhere early enough after you've gotten the news, you gotta, round up the family and say, look, there's a news that I need to share with you, and a few things are going to change around going forward, and this is the situation.
We've touched on telemedicine, we've spoken about AI, we've spoken about so many of those different, more modern approaches. What are some of the challenges, especially with chronic illnesses, but also what are some of the benefits, especially the reoccurring scripts, like you said, blood pressure, cholesterol, et cetera, et cetera?
The challenges that we often find with chronic illnesses is adherence or compliance to treatment. Because the problem comes in here, the individual is having to take the medication for life. Maybe the first year, they might have the strength, to say, look, I need to look after myself. So they make sure they're taking their medication religiously so. But as time goes progressively over time, you see this particularly, especially with the hypertensives. And the reason why hypertensive has now been deemed a silent killer is particularly for this reason. After having been diagnosed with hypertension for a good last 20 years now, you find this person now have decided, I'm only going to take these meds when I either feel my chest is heavy, or I feel I'm a bit dizzy, or I'm having a headache. And then they will then, naturally, equate that to probably my blood pressure is high. And then any other given day when I feel better, I'm just going to go about with my life. So adherence becomes a problem. Patients are not always adherent, particularly, by the time we get to the third year of the diagnosis going forth. And this is where the problem comes. When you don't adhere to the medications, it becomes a challenge because we are not hitting targets. For instance, if I'm treating you to get the numbers, especially with the sugars, we need numbers to, line up. And patients also, they become smart. When they come for the follow-up, they know, okay, tomorrow I'm going to see my doc. If I fast, I don't eat from midnight. By the time I get to his office, my sugars are looking good. Or if I at least, take my blood pressure medication this whole week every day, because I'm going to see him on Friday, my blood pressures are looking good. And then all the other times, they might not always be doing the right thing. So those are the kind of challenges, that we're also facing. Some physical barriers as well, especially depending on the socioeconomic setup. Some people might not always have the means to get to the hospitals when their follow-up are due on time. Also, if you're looking at people from a rural backgrounds, distances from homes and health facilities, access to health facilities, the transportation networks, in our rural settings are not always also adequate, and people don't have, means in terms of vehicles and so forth to make those journeys to those facilities. That then becomes a problem because a person might, go to the facility and then only rock up 2-3 years later, where then the disease has progressed and has gotten so worse, and everybody's like, where have you been for the last 3 years? I felt better and I didn't have means to get here, so I thought, it's okay for now. Those are the kind of challenges. Understanding and health literature is also a problem. You know, if, for instance, you know, the individual, you know, doesn't really have an understanding of, you know, their condition, their ability to respond in a manner that is going to help the situation becomes severely hindered and limited, in a sense that they might not do what is expected of them because they just lack the understanding. And also, literature by far, you know, in our medical fraternity, you know, has not been translated in our local languages. So language becomes a barrier. The person is not able to comprehend the concept in the language that is communicated. That becomes a problem as well. And you know, again, coming back to, you know, also, you know, if it's, for instance, an elderly patient, you know, and they depend on a third party, you know, that also becomes a challenge, because now we have to make sure that the third party or the person caring for this individual understand what they need to do, and they are committed to doing it every day on time. So those are some of the challenges. And the socioeconomic dynamics also plays out, be it, you know, accessing health services in the private sector or in the state facilities. And sometimes also we run into challenges. The state facility might be low on stock of certain medications, and now family need to collect money together to go and buy almost, you know, our blood pressure medication from a private, you know, chemist or so. And if the money is not there, unfortunately, this person might go for a whole 2-3 weeks without medication. And if their blood pressure skyrocket, they can get a stroke and die from it. They can get a heart attack and die from that. So those are the dynamics, particularly in our African setting. You know, our systems are evolving. You know, they are not as robust compared to our developed world, and we are hoping for better. But you know, that is a journey that we have to be taking, and we have to evolve with time, and then hopefully we get better as well.
Gradually, we will. Doc, we could spend the whole day chatting about this very important topic, but thank you so much for always taking time to set the record straight and abreast us with your knowledge.
It's always exciting to be here, and I'm looking forward to the next dynamic conversation.
Please feel free to always give your suggestions if you have a topic in mind for the doctor to do some homework, and we come back. We always call it the free consultation. But for now, like, share, subscribe, and send the link to someone that actually needs to hear this conversation. Until next month, it is goodbye.